Hang in there! I'm coming to save you!
16-year-old Chinidu weaved the gridlocked traffic. A basin of pure water sachets balanced expertly on his head. His worn shirt clung to his thin frame, soaked with sweat, and his bare feet had long ago stopped feeling the burning asphalt. Pure water. Cold, pure water, he called out, his voice competing with honking horns and shouting drivers. A few hands emerged from car windows with crumpled naira notes, and Chinidu quickly made exchanges, dropping coins into the small pouch tied around his waist. 16 naira so far today. Not enough for dinner for himself and the 3 younger street children who looked to him for protection. Not enough for the corner of the abandoned building where they slept. But it was only 3 in the afternoon. There was still time. Chinidu had been surviving on these streets for 2 years, ever since his grandmother, the last family member who'd taken him in after his parents died in a fire, had passed away from illness. At 14, he'd found himself completely alone in the world. No relatives willing to take in another mouth to feed. No money for school fees. Just the streets' hunger and the daily fight to survive. But he'd learned to survive. More than that, he'd learned to help others survive too. The younger children, Obi, Ngozi, and Lil Amara, they were his responsibility now, his chosen family. He shared every meal with them, protected them from the older street boys who'd try to steal from them, taught them which markets were safe and which weren't. The traffic lurched forward slightly, and Chinidu moved with it, his practiced balance keeping the water basin steady. Luxury cars surrounded him. Mercedes, Range Rovers, Lexuses, each one worth more than he'd see in 10 lifetimes. The people inside barely glanced at him. To them, he was invisible. Just another street boy. Just another face in the poverty they drove past every day. Ahead, a black Mercedes SUV with tinted windows and the royal insignia of the E's moved through traffic. Chinidu barely noticed it. He'd seen plenty of important cars before. They never stopped for water sellers. Then everything happened at once. The Mercedes swerved violently, as if the driver had lost control. It clipped another car, spun sideways, and slammed into the concrete barrier with a sickening crunch of metal. The impact flipped the vehicle onto its side. Glass exploded across the roadway. Steam began pouring from the crushed hood. Traffic screeched to a halt. Dozens of people jumped from their cars. But instead of helping, they pulled out their phones, recording, filming, capturing content for social media, while smoke began rising from the wrecked Mercedes. Chinidu heard it clearly above the chaos. A child crying, screaming, inside the smoking vehicle. His water basin hit the ground, sachets rolling across the street. He was running before conscious thought caught up with action. Others shouted at him, "Don't go near it. It might explode." Someone called the police, but he kept running. The driver's door was crushed shut, the windshield completely shattered. Chinidu ran to the passenger side, now facing upward since the car had flipped. The child's cries were coming from the back seat. Smoke was getting thicker, darker. He could smell gasoline. "I'm coming!" Chinidu shouted, hoping the child could hear him. "Hold on." He climbed onto the overturned vehicle, his hands finding purchase on the door handle. It was jammed. He pulled with all his strength, his thin arms straining, muscles burning. Nothing. The smoke was black now. Flames licked at the hood. Chinidu grabbed a piece of metal debris from the road and smashed at the window. Once, twice, 3 times. The safety glass finally gave way. Sharp edges caught his hands and arms as he reached through, but he ignored the pain, ignored the blood, ignored everything except the terrified little boy in expensive clothes buckled into a car seat. "It's okay," Chinidu said, trying to keep his voice calm even as panic screamed in his head. "I've got you." The buckle release was jammed. Chinidu's fingers, slick with his own blood, fought with a mechanism. The heat was intense now. The child, maybe 5 or 6 years old, stared at him with huge, terrified eyes, tears streaming down his chubby cheeks. "You're my angel," the little boy whimpered. "My angel came." The buckle finally gave way. Chinidu pulled the child to the broken window, cradling him against his chest, and half climbed, half fell off the overturned Mercedes. His feet hit the ground, and he ran. The child clutched tight in his bleeding arms. Behind them, the fuel tank ignited. The explosion threw them forward. Chinidu twisted his body, taking the impact on his back and shoulders, shielding the little boy with his own frame. They hit the ground hard, rolling across the asphalt. The heat of the fireball washed over them, singing the back of Chinidu's shirt. When they finally stopped rolling, Chinidu sat up slowly, his ears ringing from a blast. The little boy was crying but appeared unhurt. Chinidu pulled him onto his lap, checking him over with shaking, bloody hands. "You're okay," Chinidu said breathlessly. "You're safe now." The child threw his arms around Chinidu's neck, burying his face in his shoulder. "Don't leave me, Angel. Please don't leave." The crowd that had been filming finally approached, but they looked at Chinidu with a mixture of awe and discomfort. A security guard pushed through, speaking urgently into a radio. Someone was asking whose child this was. Another person noticed the royal insignia on the boy's small shirt. Chinidu tried to stand, to slip away back into the invisibility of the crowd, back to his water selling before someone stole his basin. But the little boy's arms tightened around his neck. "Don't go," the child sobbed. "My angel, my daddy needs to thank you. I should—" Chinidu began, but his words were drowned out by the sound of sirens. Multiple sirens, police cars, ambulances, and then 3 more Mercedes SUVs with royal insignias and flags. A woman burst from the lead vehicle before it had fully stopped, her expensive gold and purple wrapper flying behind her as she ran. Her face was twisted in maternal terror. "Chitty," she screamed. "Chitty, my baby." The little boy in Chinidu's arms lifted his head. "Mommy." Chinidu tried to hand the child to the approaching woman, but Prince Chitty's grip only tightened. The woman, draped in wealth that probably cost more than Chinidu would earn in 5 years, reached him and fell to her knees, her hands touching her son's face, his arms, checking him for injuries while tears poured down her elegant face. My son, thank God, she sobbed, taking Chitty into her arms. But the boy kept one hand locked around Chinidu's wrist. Someone in the gathering crowd whispered loudly, "That's Queen Neka. That child, that's Prince Chitty, the Iza's only son." Chinidu's blood went cold. The prince. He'd just pulled the prince from a burning car. And now the queen was staring at him. This thin street boy in torn clothes, bleeding, covered in soot. And Chinidu had no idea whether he was about to be thanked or arrested for daring to touch royalty. More vehicles arrived. Men in traditional royal regalia emerged, radiating authority and power. And then, stepping from the central SUV, came a tall man whose mere presence silenced the murmuring crowd. Ease Okafor, the king, had arrived. His stern, regal face scanned the scene, the burning wreckage, the crowd with their phones, his wife clutching their son, and the bleeding teenage boy his son refused to release. The king's deep voice cut through the noise like a blade. "What happened here? An orphan boy just saved the prince's life, while everyone else just filmed. But what happens when the poorest boy in the city becomes the most important person to the most powerful family? Don't miss what happens next. Drop a comment if you have helped like Chinidu did, like this video, and subscribe to African Tales by Zion for the next chapter. Turn on notifications because this story will touch your heart. The witnesses spoke over each other, desperate to tell their version to the king. But one voice rose above the others, a middle-aged businessman who'd been in the car directly behind the Mercedes. "Your Majesty, the driver, I think he had a heart attack or something. The car went out of control. We all stopped, but—" He gestured at the crowd with their phones. "We were calling for help. Then this boy, he just ran toward the fire. We tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. He pulled the prince out seconds before it exploded. He saved your son's life." Ease Okafor's eyes moved to Chinidu, who was trying very hard to become invisible despite being covered in blood and soot. The king approached, his expensive traditional Igbata flowing with each step, his coral beads marking his royal status. Chinidu wanted to run, but little Prince Chitty still had his wrist in a death grip. "You!" the king said, his voice stern but not angry. "What is your name?" "Say Chinidu, your Majesty." He remembered to bow his head, something he'd seen people do in movies. He'd never actually been this close to royalty before. Chinidu, how old are you? 16, sir. Your Majesty. Where are your parents? The question hit like a fist. Chinidu's jaw tightened. Dead, Your Majesty. 8 years ago. And your guardians? Your family. I have no family, sir. I live nowhere. He saw no point in lying. His torn clothes and bare feet told the story anyway. Something shifted in the king's expression, but Chinidu couldn't read it. The queen had stood now, Prince Chitty in her arms, and she was looking at Chinidu with an expression that was part gratitude, part uncertainty. You pulled my son from a burning car, the king said slowly, as if he still couldn't quite believe it, while everyone else stood watching. Why? The question confused Chinidu. He was crying. He needed help. You could have died. So could he, Your Majesty. He's just a little boy. The king stared at him for a long moment. Then, to Chinidu's shock, the powerful ruler's eyes grew wet. You gave me back my son, my only child, my heir, the most precious thing in my world. His voice grew stronger, addressing not just Chinidu but the gathered crowd. This boy risked his life when no one else would. He has no family, no home, nothing. Yet he gave everything to save a stranger's child. I owe him a debt that cannot be repaid in money or titles. But I will spend my life trying. He turned back to Chinidu. Come with us to the palace. Let us tend your injuries and thank you properly. Chinidu's mind reeled. The palace? Him? Your Majesty! I need to get back to my water selling. I have children, younger ones who depend on me for food tonight. Bring them too, the king said immediately. Any child under your protection is under mine now. Consider it done. Before Chinidu could process this, he was being gently but firmly guided into one of the royal SUVs. Queen Neka climbed in beside him, still holding Prince Chitty, who refused to let go of Chinidu's hand. What is your name? The little prince asked, his crying reduced to hiccups. Chinidu. Chinidu, the boy repeated carefully. You're my angel, Chinidu. You saved me from the fire. Your real angels are watching over you from heaven, Chinidu said gently. I just helped a little. The queen studied him with eyes that were still processing her son's near-death experience. How badly are you hurt? Chinidu looked at his hands for the first time. Deep cuts from the broken glass, burns on his arms, scrapes everywhere. He'd been ignoring the pain through adrenaline, but now it crashed over him. I'm okay, Your Majesty. No, you're not. Her voice was firm, but not unkind. We'll have the palace doctor see to you immediately. The ride to the palace was surreal. Chinidu had never been in a car before. He'd always been the one selling to people through car windows. The air conditioning was cold enough to make him shiver. The leather seats were softer than any surface he'd ever touched. And a queen sat beside him, treating him with a strange mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. The palace, when they arrived, was beyond anything Chinidu had imagined. Sprawling grounds, guards in traditional attire, buildings that looked like they belonged in history books. Staff lined up to receive the king and queen, but their eyes kept darting to the bleeding street boy in torn clothes being ushered inside like an honored guest. In the palace medical room, doctors cleaned and bandaged his wounds while Chinidu sat in stunned silence. A female doctor with kind eyes told him he'd need stitches in 3 places. He'd never had stitches before. He'd just let wounds heal on their own. When the medical staff finished, a young palace maid named Ojeki brought him water and a plate of food. Real food, rice and stew and meat and vegetables. More food than he usually saw in 3 days. Chinidu stared at it, his throat tight. Is this for me? Yes, Ojeki said gently. Eat. You must be hungry. The first bite made him want to cry. The second made tears actually fall. He tried to eat slowly, with dignity, but he was so hungry and it tasted so good, and he couldn't remember the last time someone had given him a full meal without expecting something in return. Ojeki sat quietly nearby, not judging, just present. When he finished, she smiled. Would you like more? Aye. Chinidu's voice cracked. I have friends, little ones, on the streets. Can I take them food? The king has already sent guards to find them and bring them here safely. They'll be fed too. It was too much. Too much kindness. Too much change too fast. Chinita put his head in his bandaged hands and cried. From relief, from exhaustion, from the overwhelming reality that for the first time in 2 years, he and the children he protected would sleep safely and eat fully. When he finally composed himself, Ojeki led him to a room. A guest room, she said, but it was bigger than any space Chinita had ever inhabited. There was a rail bed with clean sheets, a bathroom with running water, windows that closed, a lock on the door that he controlled. The king will want to speak with you tomorrow, Ojeki said. But tonight, rest. You're safe here. After she left, Chinidu just stood in the middle of the room, afraid to touch anything with his dirty feet and soot-stained skin. Eventually, he used the bathroom, marveling at hot water from a tap. He washed himself as best he could, put on the simple clean clothes someone had left for him, and sat on the edge of the bed. He was afraid to lie down, afraid that if he did, he'd wake up and discover this was a dream, that he was still on the streets, hungry and scared, and that Prince Chitty had died in that fire, and that this moment of kindness was just a fantasy his desperate mind had created. But exhaustion won. He lay down on sheets that smelled like soap and sunshine, pulled a blanket over himself that was warmer than anything he'd ever owned, and fell into the deepest sleep of his life. He woke in the darkness, disoriented and terrified, certain he'd been robbed or hurt. Then he remembered the palace, the king, the food, the safety. It was real. He was about to lie back down when he heard voices in the hallway. He moved to the door, pressing his ear against it, and heard two people talking in low, urgent tones. A man's voice. Your Majesty, I understand your gratitude, but we must be cautious. He's a street child. We know nothing about him. He could be dangerous. He could be working with others. This could be a setup. A woman's voice, the queen. Emika, he saved our son. He nearly died doing it. And we should reward him. The man, Emika, replied. Give him money. Arrange housing. But to bring him into the palace, to let him stay close to the prince, we need to investigate him first. Thoroughly. My husband wants to keep him close, to ensure he's cared for. With respect, Your Majesty, the king is thinking with gratitude, not with security. This boy could be anyone. We need to know his history, his associations, his character. Until then, he's a risk. Chinidu stepped back from the door, his chest tight. They thought he was dangerous. A criminal. A threat. Of course they did. He was nobody. A street boy with no background, no family, no proof of who he was except his word. Why would they trust him? He sat on the bed, staring at his bandaged hands, and wondered how long this kindness would last before they sent him back to the streets. Maybe a day. Maybe 2. He'd enjoy it while it lasted. And when they sent him away, at least he'd have the memory of the time he'd been treated like he mattered. The time he'd been, for just a moment, important enough to save. The king wants to honor Chinidu, but not everyone in the palace trusts him. Will they discover he's exactly what he appears? A good-hearted orphan? Or will suspicion drive him away? Drop your thoughts in the comments, like this video, and subscribe to African Tales by Zion so you don't miss the next chapter. Morning came too soon and too bright. Chinidu woke to sunlight streaming through real windows, in a real bed, in a real room. For a moment, he just lay there, cataloging the miracle of it. No concrete floor beneath him, no rats skittering nearby, no need to immediately start hustling for the day's food. Then reality crashed back. The voices from last night, the suspicion, the investigation. A soft knock on the door made him jump. Chinidu? May I come in? It was Ojeki, the kind maid. Yes, Ma. She entered with a tray of breakfast, more food than he'd eaten yesterday, and another set of clean clothes. The king requests your presence in 1 hour. But first, eat and wash. There's no rush. After she left, Chinidu ate slowly, savoring every bite, knowing it might be one of his last meals here. When the hour came, he dressed in the simple but clean traditional outfit they provided, a white shirt and wrapper that made him look almost respectable, and followed a guard to the king's private study. Okafor sat behind a massive desk, but when Chinidu entered, he stood and gestured to a comfortable chair. "Sit, please." "Your Majesty, I can stand." "Sit," the king repeated, gently but firmly. "You saved my son. The least you can do is sit in my presence without fear." Chinidu sat on the edge of the chair, his back straight, his hands folded in his lap. The king studied him for a long moment. "My chief of staff believes you're a security risk, that I'm being foolish to trust you." Chinidu's heart sank. "Your Majesty." "Let me finish." The king's expression was unreadable. "So I had him investigate you. Thoroughly. Do you know what he found?" "I have nothing to hide, sir. I'm nobody. Just a boy trying to survive." "Not nobody." The king opened a folder on his desk. "Chinidu Okafor. Parents died in a fire when you were 8. Raised by your grandmother until her death 2 years ago. No other living relatives. You've been living on the street since age 14, selling water and taking odd jobs in the market." He looked up, his eyes intense. "But here's what else we found. Multiple vendors testified that you share your food with younger street children, that you protect them from older boys who would exploit them, that you've never stolen, never cheated, never hurt anyone. One woman, Mama Blessing, said you once gave your only meal to her hungry grandchild. Another man said you saved his mother from being hit by a motorcycle." Chinidu's throat tightened. He hadn't known people noticed. He'd just been doing what felt right. "My chief of staff," the king continued, "wanted to find dirt on you. He wanted a reason to send you away, to protect my family from a potential threat. But do you know what he told me this morning?" Chinidu shook his head, not trusting his voice. He said, and I quote, "Your Majesty, if this boy is dangerous, then so is every saint who ever walked the earth. He's genuine. He's everything he appears to be, a good soul surviving impossible circumstances." The king stood and walked around the desk, standing before Chinidu. "You are not a threat to my family. Chinidu, you are a blessing, and I want you to stay here, not as a guest, not as someone we're merely repaying, but as part of our household. We will provide for your education, your needs, everything. In return, I ask only that you continue being who you already are." "Your Majesty, I don't understand. Why would you do this for me?" "Because you did something for me that I can never repay. And because—" The king's voice softened. "Because my son has not stopped asking for you since he woke up this morning. He wants his angel, to read him stories, to play with him, to be near him. And I have never seen him attached to anyone so quickly or so completely." As if summoned by the mention, the door burst open and Prince Chidi ran in, his little face lighting up when he saw Chinidu. "Chinidu, you're still here. Mommy said you might be." The little boy threw himself at Chinidu, who caught him instinctively, his recently stitched hands careful but warm. "Hello, little prince," Chinidu said, smiling despite his confusion about his place here. "I had a bad dream," Chidi said seriously, "about the fire, but then I remembered you saved me and I felt better. Will you stay? Please? I want you to be my big brother." Chinidu looked at the king helplessly. How could he explain to a 6-year-old that he was just a street boy, that big brothers didn't come from nowhere, that this wasn't how the world worked? But the king was smiling. "If Chinidu agrees to stay, he will be like a big brother to you. Would you like that, Chinidu?" The word stuck in Chinidu's throat. "Stay. Not for a day or a week, but stay. Have a place. Have a purpose. Have people who want him around not for what he could do, but for who he was." Chinidu's voice cracked. "I would be honored, Your Majesty." The days that followed were strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Chinidu was given a permanent room in the palace, better clothes, and regular meals. The 3 younger street children he'd been protecting, Obi, Ngozi, and Amara, were also brought to the palace, given the care of the household staff who would ensure they were fed, clothed, and eventually enrolled in school. But the strangest part was Prince Chidi's attachment. The young prince wanted Chinidu everywhere, to eat breakfast with him, to play in the gardens, to read stories before bed. And Chinidu found himself falling into the role naturally, protective and patient with a little boy who'd somehow decided that his rescuer was the most important person in the world. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden with Chitty drawing pictures while Chinidu read, Queen Neka approached. Chinidu immediately stood and bowed, but she gestured for him to sit. "May I join you?" "Of course, Your Majesty. This is your home." She sat on the bench beside him, watching her son color with fierce concentration. "He loves you," she said simply. "In just a week, you become essential to him. I don't mean to overstep, Your Majesty. I know my place." "Do you?" She turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "Because I'm not sure you do. You still act like a guest, like someone waiting to be sent away. But my husband meant what he said. You're part of this household now. I'm nobody, Your Majesty. I'm a street boy who happened to be in the right place. I don't deserve." My son was dying in a burning car. Everyone else watched. You ran toward the flames. If that doesn't deserve a home, a family, a future, then I don't understand the meaning of deserve. She paused. "I'll be honest with you. When my husband first brought you here, I was uncertain. I didn't know you. I worried about your influence on Chitty. But I've been watching you this week." Chinida's heart raced. This was it. The moment she'd tell him it wasn't working, that he needed to leave. "I've watched you teach my son to say thank you to the palace staff, to notice the gardener's hard work, to share his toys with the other children. I've watched you deflect his praise, redirect his admiration to the people around him rather than yourself. I've watched you maintain your humility despite being surrounded by wealth and privilege." She smiled, and it reached her eyes. "You're good for him, Chinidu. You're good for this family. And I want you to know that you belong here." Chinidu couldn't speak. He just nodded, his throat too tight with emotion. That night, after tucking Prince Chitty into bed and listening to his sleepy request for just one more story, Chinidu returned to his room to find the king waiting for him. "Your Majesty, is something wrong?" "No, I wanted to talk to you. Privately." The king gestured to the chairs by the window, and they sat. "You've been here a week. How are you adjusting?" It's more than I ever dreamed of, sir. I'm grateful. But you're still sleeping with your clothes on, aren't you? Still hoarding food in your room. Still waking up multiple times a night to make sure this is real." Chinita stared at him, shocked that the king had noticed these things. "Ojeki told me." The king explained gently, "Not to betray your trust, but because she's worried about you. Chinidu, I understand that trust is hard when life has given you every reason not to trust. But I need you to understand something. This isn't temporary. This isn't charity that will run out. You are under my protection now. You are part of my household. That means you are safe. Permanently." "But why?" Chinidu's voice broke. "Why would you do this for someone like me?" "Someone like you?" The king's voice grew firm. "Someone who risks his life for strangers? Someone who protects children smaller than himself? Someone who shares his food when he's starving? Chinidu, you are exactly the kind of person the world needs more of. The kind of person I want my son to grow up to be." He leaned forward. "Tomorrow, we're making a formal announcement. The kingdom will learn about what you did. And I'm going to publicly honor you as a hero and a member of this royal household." Chinidu's eyes went wide. "Your Majesty, the people won't accept that. I'm a street boy. They'll think what I tell them to think. And I'll tell them the truth, that you have more nobility in your heart than most people born to titles." The next morning, Chinidu stood on the palace balcony beside the royal family, his legs shaking as hundreds of people gathered below. The king addressed him, his powerful voice carrying across the crowd, telling the story of the rescue, of the boy who'd run toward fire while others filmed, of the debt that could never be repaid. And then he said something that made Chinidu's world tilt. "I am formally adopting Chinidu Okafor into the royal household. He will be raised as my son, educated as a prince, and treated with the full honor and respect that his character has earned." The crowd erupted, some in cheers, some in shocked whispers. But before anyone could protest or celebrate, another voice rose from the crowd. Mama Blessing, the old market woman who'd sometimes fed Chinidu, pushed her way forward. "Your Majesty," she called. "May I speak?" The king nodded, and she continued, her voice strong despite her age. "That boy has been like a grandson to me these past 2 years. I have watched him give his last bite of food to a hungry baby. I have watched him protect smaller children from harm. I have watched him refuse to steal even when he was starving. If you honor him as a prince, you honor the best of us. We support this." One by one, other voices joined. Market vendors, street sweepers, the invisible people of the city who'd witnessed Chinidu's daily kindness. They spoke of his character, his sacrifices, his goodness. Standing on that balcony, listening to people he thought hadn't noticed him testify to a life he thought was invisible, Chinidu couldn't hold back his tears. Prince Chidi grabbed his hand. "See? Everyone loves you, just like me." That night, after the formal adoption ceremony with traditional rites and royal pronouncements, Chinidu lay in his bed, his permanent bed, in his permanent room, in his permanent home, and let himself believe it. He was Chinidu Okafor, adopted son of the king. He had a family. He had a future. He had a little brother who loved him. And it all started because he'd done the one thing that felt right, help a child in need. Chinidu is now a prince. But not everyone in the kingdom is happy about a street boy joining the royal family. Can he truly belong in this world of wealth and power? Don't miss the next chapter. Like this video. Subscribe to African Tales by Zion and turn on notifications for what happens next. 3 months after the adoption, Prince Chinidu was still adjusting to his new reality. The title sat uncomfortably on his shoulders like borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit. He attended lessons with private tutors, learning to read and write properly after years of interrupted education. He learned palace protocols, traditional customs, the expectations of someone bearing a royal title. But the hardest part wasn't the lessons or the expectations. It was believing he deserved it. "You're doing it again," Queen Nekka said one afternoon, finding him standing outside the dining hall rather than entering. "Doing what, Your Majesty?" "Treating yourself like a guest. This is your home, Chinidu. You don't wait for permission to enter rooms. You don't eat after everyone else is served. You are my son now. Act like it." The words were gentle but firm. She'd been working on breaking through his reflexive subservience, but old survival habits died hard. Inside the dining hall, Prince Chidi was already eating, but he lit up when Chinidu entered. "You're here. I saved you the seat next to me." The king looked up from his meal and smiled. "How were your lessons today?" "Good, Your Majesty. My tutor says I'm catching up quickly in mathematics." "Of course you are. You're brilliant." This came from Chidi, who worshipped everything his adopted brother did. The easy family dinner was interrupted by Emeka, the king's chief of staff, entering with an urgent expression. "Your Majesty, there's a situation at the palace gates." The king stood immediately. "What kind of situation?" "A large crowd. They're asking to speak with you. About Prince Chinidu." Chinidu's stomach dropped. This was it. The people had come to protest, to demand that the street boy be sent away from the royal family, that the king reverse the adoption and return things to the proper order. "I'll address them," the king said, his voice hard. "If anyone has a problem with my decision—" "Your Majesty," Emeka interrupted, his expression odd, "I don't think it's a protest." The royal family and Chinidu moved to the balcony that overlooked the palace gates. Chinidu's legs felt weak as he saw the massive crowd, hundreds of people, maybe more. But as they came closer to the railing, he noticed something strange. The people were smiling. Many held signs. Some had gifts. The king called down, "My people, what brings you here today?" An older man stepped forward, and Chinidu recognized him, one of the street vendors from a market where he used to sell water. "Your Majesty, we heard about the boy you adopted, Prince Chinidu. We came to tell you something important." The crowd parted, and more people stepped forward. One by one, they began to speak. "I'm a fruit seller in the market," a woman called out. "Prince Chinidu, before he was a prince. He used to protect my daughter from the older boys who would harass her. He never asked for anything in return." Another voice. "I own a restaurant near the old motor park. One night, I saw Prince Chinidu give his dinner to 3 younger children. He went hungry so they could eat. That's the kind of boy he is. Mama Blessing pushed her way to the front. Your Majesty, I'm an old woman and I've seen many things in my life, but I've never seen a child with a heart as pure as Chinidu's. He protected the weak. He shared what little he had. He never stole, never lied, never hurt anyone. The streets are cruel and they make people cruel, but they didn't make him cruel. They made him kinder. Tears streamed down Chinidu's face as person after person testified. The motorcycle driver whose mother Chinidu had saved. The shop owner whose falling goods Chinidu had caught. The young mother whose baby Chinidu had fed. Story after story of small kindnesses that Chinidu had never expected anyone to notice or remember. We didn't come to protest, the old vendor said, his voice ringing clear. We came to support. That boy earned his place in the palace through his character. We are proud that one of our own, one of the invisible people, has been recognized. Prince Chinidu represents the best of us. The crowd erupted in agreement. Signs were raised higher, and Chinidu could finally read them. Prince Chinidu, true nobility, character over birth, our hero, our prince. The king's hand fell heavy and warm on Chinidu's shoulder. You see? They know what I know, that true royalty has nothing to do with blood or birth. It's about character, and yours shines brighter than any crown. After the crowd dispersed, though not before leaving gifts and flowers at the gate, the king called a family meeting in his private study. Chinidu, still overwhelmed by the day's events, sat with the king, queen, and little Prince Chitty. I've been thinking about something, the king said. Chinidu, you told me once that you dreamed of helping children like yourself. Street children with no homes, no families, no hope. What if we made that dream a reality? Chinidu looked up, hardly daring to hope. Your Majesty, what if we built a home for them? A place where they can live safely, eat regularly, go to school, have a future. You would help run it. You would be their advocate, their voice. Someone who understands what they've lived through, because you lived through it too. You would do that. Chinidu's voice was barely a whisper. We would do that, the queen corrected gently. As a family, this would be your project, your legacy, the thing you give back to the community that raised you. Prince Chitty, not fully understanding but excited nonetheless, jumped up. Can I help? I want to help the children too. The king laughed and pulled his youngest son onto his lap. Yes, you can help. We all will. But this will be Chinidu's special project. His way of honoring where he came from while building something better for those who come after. Over the next 2 months, plans were drawn up. A piece of royal land was designated. Architects were hired. And most importantly, Chinidu was involved in every decision. He insisted on reading corners in the dormitories where children could feel safe. He wanted a big kitchen where kids could learn to cook. He demanded that the staff be people who genuinely cared about children, not just those looking for employment. And he knew exactly what to name it. One evening at dinner, he made his announcement. I won't call it Neka House, he said quietly, after my grandmother, who took me in when my parents died. She did her best with nothing. She loved me, and I want other children to have that same love. The queen's eyes filled with tears. That's beautiful, Chinidu. But Chinidu continued, I also want a second name. Ikena and Chioma House. Those were my parents' names. They died protecting me in the fire. I don't remember much about them, but I remember they loved me. So the full name would be Ikena and Chioma House, dedicated to Neka, a home built on love and memory. The king nodded solemnly. It's perfect and fitting. We'll make it official. The day of the opening ceremony arrived with both excitement and nerves. A beautiful new building stood ready, capable of housing 50 children with room to expand. Staff had been carefully selected and trained, and dozens of street children, identified through community outreach, were ready to move in. Chinidu stood before the gathered crowd, which included royal officials, community leaders, and most importantly, the street vendors and market workers who'd known him in his previous life. He wore traditional royal attire, but his speech came from the heart of the street boy he'd been. 3 months ago, I was sleeping in an abandoned building, hungry, scared, invisible, he began. his voice steady despite his nerves. "I know what it's like to wonder if you'll eat today, to be afraid of the dark because you have no safe place to sleep, to feel like the world doesn't see you, doesn't care if you exist." He gestured to the building behind him. "This home exists because I was seen, because one act of courage led to a chain of kindness that changed my life. But I was lucky. Most street children aren't. Most stay invisible. Most stay hungry. Most stay scared." His voice strengthened. "But not anymore. Not here. Every child matters. Every child deserves safety, food, education, love. And this home will provide that." He looked at the king and queen standing proudly beside him. "My family taught me that true nobility isn't about crowns or titles. It's about using whatever power you have to protect those who have none. Today, we open these doors. Tomorrow, we change lives. And every day after that, we remember, no child is invisible. No child is worthless. Every single one matters." The applause was thunderous. But what moved Chinedu most was seeing the children, his former companions from the streets, plus many new faces, stepping through those doors into safety, into hope, into a future. That night, exhausted but fulfilled, Chinedu sat with Prince Chitty in the palace gardens. The younger boy had been his shadow all day, helping where he could, greeting children, being the kind, compassionate prince his brother was teaching him to be. "Chinedu?" Chitty asked sleepily. "Are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. Was he happy? He thought about the journey, the fire that killed his parents, the grandmother who died, the 2 years of homelessness and hunger, the moment of choice when he'd run toward a burning car, and everything that had followed. "Yes," he said finally, honestly. "I'm happy, more than I ever thought possible." "Good," Chitty said, snuggling closer, "because you're my best big brother, and best big brothers should be happy." Chinedu hugged the little prince who'd changed his life simply by needing to be saved. And he realized something profound. The fire that should have killed Prince Chitty had instead saved them both. Chitty was saved from death, and Chinedu was saved from invisibility, from a life of just surviving into a life of purpose, belonging, and love. Sometimes, he thought, the most beautiful destinies are born from the scariest moments. You just have to be brave enough to run toward the flames. Chinedu has found his purpose and built a home for street children. But there's one more chapter to this beautiful journey. What could possibly be left to discover? Don't miss the powerful conclusion. Like this video. Subscribe to African Tales by Zion and turn on notifications for the emotional finale. 1 year after the rescue, 1 year after everything changed, Prince Chinedu stood in the king's private study for a meeting he'd been told was important. He was 17 now, taller, healthier, more confident in his royal bearing. But beneath the traditional attire and the title, he was still the boy who'd sold water on the streets. The king sat behind his desk, but his expression was softer than usual. The queen sat beside him, and even little Prince Chitty was present, his 7-year-old face serious as he tried to mirror his father's regal bearing. "Chinedu, sit please," the king said. "We have something to tell you. Something we've been investigating for several months." A flutter of anxiety moved through Chinedu's chest. Investigations. Had he done something wrong? Failed in some way? The queen must have seen his face because she reached across and took his hand. "It's not bad news, my son. It's complicated, but important." The king opened a folder on his desk. "When we adopted you, I had my people research your background, not because I doubted you, but because I want to understand your history, your family, where you came from." He paused. "Chinedu, did you know that your father, Ikena Okonkwo, worked for Palace?" Chinedu shook his head. I don't remember much about him. Just that he was kind, that he loved us, and that he died trying to save us from a fire." "He was kind," the king confirmed, "but he was also a hero. Your father was a palace guard during my father's reign. 25 years ago, when I was a young man, there was an assassination attempt on my father, the old Ease. Your father, Ikena, threw himself between the assassin and my father. He took the bullets meant for the king. He died saving my father's life." The world seemed to tilt. Chinidu stared at the king, unable to process what he was hearing. Your mother, Chioma, was caught in the same attack. She was a palace seamstress, working nearby when the violence erupted. She died trying to reach your father. The king's voice was thick with emotion. You were a baby then, not even a year old. My father ensured you were cared for, sent to live with your grandmother with a trust fund to support you. But when my father died, the records were misplaced. And when your grandmother passed away, you slipped through the cracks. You ended up on the streets, and we never knew. My father... Chinidu's voice broke. My father saved the king. He saved my father. He gave his life so my father could live. And when you saved Chitty... The king stood and moved around the desk, kneeling before Chinidu so they were eye to eye. When you saved my son, you weren't just repaying a debt I owed your father. You were continuing a legacy. Your family has saved the royal family twice. First your father, then you. It's as if the universe brought you back to us, brought you home. Tears streamed down Chinidu's face. I thought they were nobody. I thought I came from nothing. You come from heroes, the queen said firmly, from people of honor and sacrifice. Just like you, Prince Chitty, unable to stay silent any longer, jumped from his chair and threw his arms around Chinidu. Your daddy saved my grandfather. That means we were always supposed to be brothers. The king pulled both boys into his arms, and the queen joined them, and for a moment, they were just a family embracing, bound by grief and gratitude and love. Later that evening, the king made a public announcement. The kingdom learned not just about Chinidu's rescue of the prince, but about his father's sacrifice decades earlier. A memorial was commissioned, a statue of Ikena Okonkwo, the guard who'd given his life for his king, standing watchful and protective, and beside it, another statue, Chinidu Okonkwo, the boy who'd run into fire to save a prince. 2 generations, the inscription read, 2 acts of courage, 1 family of heroes. But for Chinidu, the most important moment came that night when he visited Ikena and Chioma House. The children's home was thriving now. 37 children housed, fed, educated, loved. Staff who genuinely cared. Programs that gave children skills and hope. Lives being transformed daily. He gathered the children in the common room. Kids ranging from 6 to 16, all of them rescued from the streets as he had been rescued. I learned something today, he told them, about my parents, about where I come from. And I wanted to share it with you because I think you need to hear it. He told them about his father's sacrifice, about his mother's love, about the legacy he'd unknowingly carried. And then he said the thing he wished someone had told him during those 2 years of homelessness and hunger. Where you come from doesn't define you. I came from heroes, but I didn't know it. I thought I came from nothing. I thought I was nothing. And that's the lie the world tells children like us, that we don't matter, that we're invisible, that we have no value. His voice grew stronger. But it's a lie. Every single one of you has value. Every single one of you comes from somewhere, from someone, from a story that matters. And even if you don't know that story yet, even if your parents aren't here to tell you, you can write your own story. You can be your own hero. A small voice in the front, a 9-year-old girl named Amara, asked, "But how? How do we become heroes when we have nothing?" Chinidu knelt down to her level. You already have everything you need. You have a heart that can choose kindness over cruelty. You have hands that can help instead of hurt. You have a voice that can speak up for those who can't speak for themselves. Being a hero isn't about having money or power or a title. It's about making the choice in the moment it matters, to do the right thing even when it's hard. He looked around at all of them. I ran into fire because a child needed help. That's all. I didn't think about rewards or recognition. I just thought about a scared little boy who needed someone to care. And that one choice changed everything. Not just for me, but for Prince Chitty, for this family, for this kingdom, and now for all of you. Because every person in this room has been given a chance because of that one moment. So, what do we do? Another child asked. You live, you learn, you grow, and when your moment comes, and it will come, you make the brave choice. You help, you care, you refuse to be cruel, even when the world has been cruel to you. And then you pass that kindness on. You become the person you needed when you were alone and scared. The room was quiet, but it was the good kind of quiet, the kind that comes when truth lands in hearts ready to receive it. Later, as Chinedu walked back to the palace, he was joined by the king, who'd been standing in the back of the room listening to the whole speech. "You're a natural leader," the king said. "You inspire them. I just tell them the truth. The truth I wish someone had told me. Your father would be proud of you. Your mother, too." Chinedu smiled, looking up at the night sky. "I like to think they're watching, that they know I'm okay, that I'm living a life that honors their sacrifice. You are, more than you know." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment before the king spoke again. "I have a request. A favor, really. Anything, Your Majesty. Stop calling me Your Majesty when we're alone. Call me Father, because that's what I am. Not because of adoption papers or royal decrees, but because I love you as my son, just as I love Chitty." Chinedu's throat tightened with emotion. "Father," he said, testing the word. It felt right. It felt like home. 3 years later, at age 20, Prince Chinedu stood before a graduating class at the University of Nigeria, giving the commencement address. He'd completed his own education with honors, studying social work and child welfare, preparing to dedicate his life to the cause that had become his calling. "I was 17 when I learned that my father was a hero," he told the graduates. "But the truth is, I've been surrounded by heroes my whole life. My grandmother who raised me with nothing, the street vendors who fed me when they could barely feed themselves, the little children I protected who taught me that family isn't about blood, the king and queen who saw worth in a street boy. Every single person who chooses kindness over cruelty is a hero." He paused, letting his words sink in. "You're graduating today into a world that will tell you success is measured in money and status and power. But I'm here to tell you differently. Success is measured in lives touched, in kindness given, in courage shown when it would be easier to look away. You all have the power to be heroes, not by running into burning cars, though do that if you must, but by simply refusing to walk past suffering without trying to help." The applause was thunderous, but what moved Chinedu most was seeing the front row. King Okafor, Queen Nneka, Prince Chitty, now 10 and already showing signs of becoming a compassionate leader, and representatives from Ikenna and Chioma House, including several of the children he'd spoken to that night 3 years ago, now thriving young people with bright futures. After the ceremony, Prince Chitty ran to him, as he always did, with a huge smile. "That was amazing. You're going to change the world." "We're going to change the world," Chinedu corrected. "Together, as brothers, as family." That evening, the whole royal family gathered on the palace balcony, overlooking the kingdom that had once been a place of hunger and fear for Chinedu, but was now home. In the distance, they could see Ikenna and Chioma House, its lights glowing warmly, sheltering children who would otherwise have nowhere to go. "Do you ever think about it?" the queen asked softly. "That day? The choice you made." "Every day," Chinedu admitted. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had just kept walking. If I had been like everyone else with their phones, watching but not helping." "But you didn't," the king said firmly, "because that's not who you are. It wasn't then and it isn't now." "I think about it too," Prince Chitty said quietly. Everyone turned to look at the young prince, who was growing wise beyond his years. "I think about the angel who saved me. But then I realize you weren't an angel, Chinedu. You were just a boy who chose to be brave. And that's better than an angel, because it means anyone can do it. Anyone can choose to be brave, to be kind, to help. You prove that." Chinedu pulled his little brother into a hug. This child who'd changed his life simply by needing to be saved. "You know what I think," he said. "I think we saved each other. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose, and I gave you a chance to live, to grow into the good king you're going to be someday." The king placed a hand on each of his son's shoulders. "I think you're both right, and I think that's the real lesson here. When we help others, we help ourselves. When we save others, we save ourselves. Kindness is never one-directional. It always comes back." As the sun set over the kingdom, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Prince Chinidu felt a peace he'd never known in his years on the street. He'd found his family. He'd found his purpose. He'd found his home. And it had all started with one choice: to run toward danger instead of away from it, to help instead of film, to care about a stranger's child more than his own safety. That choice had saved a life, but it had also changed a kingdom, transformed dozens of children's futures, and proved something that the world needed to remember. True nobility isn't inherited. It's chosen. Every single day, in every single moment, by every single person who decides that kindness matters more than comfort, that others' lives matter as much as their own, and that the measure of a person isn't where they start, but what they do with what they have, even if what they have is just 2 hands and a brave heart. And sometimes, just sometimes, one brave choice can rewrite destiny, not just for one person, but for everyone their life touches, forever, from the streets to the palace, from invisible to unforgettable. Chinidu's journey shows us that goodness is always rewarded, and that one moment of courage can change everything. If this story touched your heart, smash that like button and subscribe to African Tales by Zion for more inspiring stories of hope, courage, and destiny. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that their kindness matters, that their good heart is seen, and that better days are coming. Drop a comment telling us what you loved most about Chinidu's journey. What story should we tell next? Let us know below. Remember, you never know how one moment of courage might change everything. Keep being kind. Keep being brave. Your breakthrough might be closer than you think. God bless you all.